Good morning all. Well, the latest thing I've bought is some of these. They're 500 millimeter, 50 centimeter, half a meter long strip lights with little clusters of 3 surface mount LEDs and a 39 ohm resistor. Little end cap, plastic end caps. Well, in fact, I can show the component parts better with these bits. We've got 2 plastic end caps which you put at the ends. We've got the aluminium strip, which is also a printed circuit board. You can see, I'll get closer in a minute, but you can see the tracks that these sets of LEDs are attached onto. So there's 2 parallel tracks running down there. There's a short piece of wire at the end. It's quite thin, because one thing that you notice about these is that they're very much built down to a price. This aluminium extrusion is so thin that it's kind of bordering on tin foil. I'll show that in a moment a little bit better when I chop this one up. And then there's this very thin plastic sort of semicircular dome piece which just clips over the top and then sits inside these end caps. They are cheaply made, but they're quite nice, and I've decided to get quite a few more of these for various projects. But the first thing I want to do is chop this one up. Let me explain why. So I'm in the kitchen, and under the kitchen cabinets I have these under cabinet lights. Let me go the other way so that the sun's not shining into the camera lens. And you can see that there are 2 strips of LEDs. And again, these are triples, 3 LEDs, 1 resistor. Now the whole thing's being powered by that. It's a 4 amp, 12 volt power supply. It terminates in a 2.1 millimeter plug here. And there's one of those CCTV style sockets there, just pushed into a pipe clip, so it all hangs underneath the cabinet, and it's wired onto the strips there. A little bit bodgery, but what's far worse than all of this is what happens when I switch them on. And it's this: they just haven't fared at all well. A number of them flicker, half of them aren't working at all. They just don't last. They're terrible, and they were never very bright to start with, which is why I had 2 rows. And now the lighting on the surface under the cabinets is just really awful. It's dim. However, on this other side it's wonderfully bright, and that's because I fitted one of these new strip lights under the cabinet there. It's beautifully lit, very bright. It does get quite warm, but I don't think there's going to be a problem because I've left it on for several hours. I don't know why I twisted that wire, but I think to make it more homogeneous so that it would hang in midair. Once again, I've got the little connector system there, but you can see I've used an additional push fit connector, and this blue wire is solid core wire because it's very difficult working under here. And when you finally get to finish the wiring, just push those wires into that, I think they're called Weimer or Wearer or something, connectors. It just makes it so much easier to finish the job. Now there's this little corner of the kitchen, and under here there was a short fluorescent tube. The whole kitchen had fluorescent tubes originally, but the bulbs kept blowing and they're difficult to find and they just didn't last. So I need a little short piece to go under there, and that's why I'm going to cut up that strip. So the maximum width I can realistically put under there is about 10 inches. Now I've got to allow for the end caps as well. That doesn't add much, but I don't think I can quite go to, no I can't. So I'm going to have to go to there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little groups of 3 LEDs. So I think I'm going to cut it there. Be interesting to see when I cut this. Now what am I going to cut it with? Probably some old scissors. So of course in its uncut state I'll put 12 volts on it from these batteries. Going to get them to connect. Yeah, that all works fine. Will it still work in its cut state? Now I don't want to use my nice sharp paper cutting scissors for this because it's not going to do them much good. So I'm going to use these older scissors which I use for a variety of things. So let's cut. So 5 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's cut across here. Yeah, that cuts reasonably easily. Let's see if it still works. That cutting put a bit of a bow on this, a bit of a curve, so I'm just going to press it flat with the finger hole of these scissors. Right, let's try that. Right, that's very interesting. I can hear crackling when I connect it to this battery, and they don't light. So I think we've got a short up here where I've cut it. Oh yes, and that's really very hot. No, it's not very hot, it's just warm, but that's obviously been getting hot because of the dead short through these tracks. So it's obviously shorted up here, so I think perhaps a bit of filing there might fix that. So I've got a little cheap plastic handled file here. I'm just going to take that edge off, and actually hopefully as I file this I'll see the copper tracks emerge, if I put enough of an angle on this, under there. Yeah, let's see if that's done it. Connect the 12 volts, and yeah, that's fixed the short just by filing the end. So what I need to do now is cut the aluminium extrusion, then I can show you just how thin it is. Also cut this plastic sort of semicircular dome top, and then put the end caps on. Now, despite the very light weight of this extrusion, it's still going to have to be sawn, because if I cut it I'm just going to flatten it. So I'll get my little junior hacksaw and cut through there. Right, which is the least bent of these two junior hacksaws? I think actually that plain framed one is probably best. Right, let's use that. Right, having sawn, filed and brushed this clean, I knew that wouldn't hold focus. There's the end. I mean it's bendy. It's probably about 0.5 millimeter thick, maybe 0.4, but I think it's enough just to hold this up. I mean, all you're doing is literally holding the weight of this, and there's no weight to it. Right, let's assemble it and try and get it closely in position. Yes, that's quite cute. Here's my little baby strip light, 5 of the 12 segments that it starts with. Let's do a final check on that. Yeah, that works lovely. That's going to look good. Well, now to fit it. So it's got to fit under here. This is not going to be easy. It's not going to be elegant. For the other one I was having to lie on the counter upside down and work upside down. But yeah, it's basically going to go there. I probably won't document the full fitting process of that. I'll just get on with it. Right, there's the hardware attached. I can't see whether this image is in focus because I'm lying upside down and the phone is pretty much on top of my face. There's the little pipe clip, 15mm pipe clip, which will hold the female CCTV 2.1mm connector, and there's the housing for the light. The light itself isn't in there yet, it's here. But I want to change that red and black cable for the solid core blue so that I can push fit it when I finally connect it into the little push fit connector. Right, let's remove those wires. This solder is really horrible. I don't know whether it's solder paste or whether it's lead-free solder, but it just, let's switch the iron on. I don't know, it just goes a sort of goopy, pasty, it's horrible. If it is lead-free, it's going to get a bit of lead mixed with it now, just so I can transfer the heat. But it's really weird, it's just like paste. Of course, it's sucking the heat out of the iron very quickly because there's a lot of metal here. But yeah, it's very odd stuff to work with, so I want to clean as much of that off as I can. Maybe it's just the fact that this is a massive heat sink, it just feels odd. I don't know. Anyway, let's get some nice lead based solder on these pads. Yeah, it just feels better with lead based solder on there. Let's make them nice and blobby. And then I'll put my solid core wire in, which I know is a good push fit into those little connectors. Not sure where they are, I'm going to have to find them. Right, I found a little piece that I was experimenting with, already coiled into a twisted pair. The twisted pair is irrelevant because it's DC, but it just helps to make it a bit more rigid. So let's just tin these. This insulation is not heat. What's the word? It does react to heat in that the insulation moves back a bit when you heat it, so it's not ideal. Okay, let's solder that onto there. That's going to need to be re-angled to that direction. Not too worried about polarity at the moment. I can retest that later on. Let's just get that on there. Make it so that it's... Oh, that's not very nice, is it? That needs a bit more solder in order to get a bit more flux onto there. Oh yeah, that's fine. I just want that coming out at the right angle. Okay, I'll just test a battery on that. Right, let's try it that way around. Nope, let's try it this way around. Yeah, so that all works, that's fine. And then I can cut this to length, strip them back, and they can push into the push fit connector once this is all in place. Good. And now it's several days later and that job is done and it looks fantastic. I actually put the blue wires straight into the CCTV connector because I couldn't find those Wago connectors in the end. I found them now, of course, but yeah, that looks really good. And I'm recording this several days later because I wanted to make sure that that one and its counterpart, the full length one, were reliable, and they do seem to be. We've had several multi-hour saturation tests of these things, and they don't seem to overheat. They don't seem to have discoloured or gone dim or anything like that. In fact, I think thermally they work very well, which is a good thing, because I want to use them in my new work area, which is out here on the patio. I've put a roof over this area here so that I can function out here even when the weather's terrible, which it is today. I've even got my 12-volt battery there being charged with my solar charge controller, which you can barely see because it's so tiny. But yeah, this is going to be an area where I want to work, and of course, as well as dry, I want this to be very well lit. So there are going to be a lot of those strip lights underneath those rafters. Cheerio.